some cuts to give that facet style to the rock. Once I have this, I just start to give a little bit of roundness. Since my reference, I have my reference here, I can see that it has some small roundness due to the erosion, maybe. So we can start pulling out the faces a little bit, start deforming it. Like here. Once I have that, I just give some, just to try with the trim dynamic brush, start to add some cuts here, and also with my clip curve brush, I just start to make some cuts on the corners. And once I have my kind of my basic shape here, I just make a series measure. I just apply a series measure. And you can see here, normally I just project, I make a lower version of the series measure and just project that to the Dynamesh subtool. But in this case we can work with this one, so I just start to adding some subdivisions and apply some or flatten brush, this one, or flatten edge. Oops, this one, to polish a little bit better the edges. Together with the trim dynamic brush. Once I'm happy with the results, I just start breaking up the shape a little bit on the corners again. Like this one, for example. And you can do like kind of this separation, like you have this face and next you have this face kind of with this crease here. Should be a little bit more polished, but just for now I think it's okay. And also on the edges, some of the edges, if you have like, for example, this edge, you can add some details like this one to help breaking a little bit more the silhouette and the edge. And after the overall shape is done and the damaging on the corners, on the edges, I start to add some, with a little bit of the intensity on low, I just start add some of the orb rock detail, this one. for example. And in some cases where I have this noisy surface and this noisy surface, I just give a trim dynamic or flatten edge to break up the detail here. And this is the overall process for the rocks. Obviously with a little bit more of time and polish. For this tileable ground here, I applied the same technique I did for the rocks. I did this variation and also this other variation, which is kind of a flatter ground. I try to achieve this look from the orb portfolio, and if you can see here, these have the same placement for the rocks. Just this has more like a rocky shape, and this has more of a flatter look. So I try to replicate and achieve the same style for both of the texture. What I did here was just taking the same rocks I have here and making some adjustments, like apply some flatten using the clip curve brush and the orb flatten brush. And after that, I just adjusted the crevices to close the gaps between. The rest of the details are done using the orb rock detail brush, some trim dynamic brush on the edges, and the small pebbles brush on top of some rocks. For the pine leaves, I started from a sphere and applied a Dynamesh to it, and started to deformate it until I had this branch shape. For the needles, I just started from this basic shape, and then I duplicated and distributed around the branch, and then pull it out a bit, some of the tips, until I got the style from the reference. For the tree leaves, I applied kind of the same process. First, I did a paint over using the reference to help me understand the shapes better. After that, I just sculpted some basic leaves and distribute them until I got a similar result. For the tileable sculpt, I decided to use Substance Designer just for practice. As you can see here, the texturing process for the floor is basically the same between them. I just wanted to be sure that the colors were the same on both textures, as you can see here in the references. Same for the grass material and grass blades, where both were done directly in Substance Designer. I had to be sure that the two textures had the same color tone, or at least very similar, to avoid any visible seams between the floor and the cords. Just to show you a quick breakdown of the trees in Maya, I just applied the base color to a flat plane and start cutting the plane in the different pieces I needed. Then I do a polish and start to move the vertices to give it a better of a leaf shape. I used this option in the transform tool to keep my UVs in place while adjusting the verts. Once I'm done with the leaf shape, I just turn off the preserve UV option and just replace it and duplicate it around the trunk. For the other kind of tree, I used the same but using this plane shape instead, and arrange them a bit different. So for this final step, I use the default scene inside Unreal Engine 4 to throw the assets and do the material settings. I just have 3 master materials, one for the tower, rocks and trunk with an standard configuration, and one for the leaves and grass blades since they are using transparency and some wind effects. And the last one for the floor with the 4 materials applied using vertex paint. After everything is working and after some test to the vertex paint floor, I created a new level and start placing the assets to build the scene environment. I just wanted to have the tower in the center and some rocks in the background as some kind of natural wall, and the trees around the tower like a forest. I just tried to moving stuffs and see what could work better. As you can see here, this is the entire scene for this environment, and it has some of the assets I made before, like these rocks, all of the trees, the floor with the 4 materials applied with vertex paint, these bushes, and of course the tower. I wanted to give it a night mood to this scene with some bluish lighting, but at the end I added some lights like this one here and this here and a couple more here to help me break the flat look and bring some interesting contrast and some richness to the color of the scene. And just one note, here you can see what I said about maintaining the same color tones between the textures. For example, this is one of the ground tile texture and this is the other. And you can see here the blending between those two. But in terms of color tone, you can see that it's the same. Same for the rocks here, the rock mesh. I try to maintain the same color tone between these meshes and the floor, the rock texture of the floor. And also the grass texture for the ground, the tileable grass texture and these blade cards. You can see here that there is a bit of seam, but in general they share the same color, so it has kind of a smooth transition between the tileable texture and the grass cards. This is all for now. I hope this breakdown helps you, and thanks for watching.